Hello, treasure seekers and fans of the Civil War Gold Show. I'm back. That's right, it's me, Treasure Troller. How's everybody doing? So I thought we were out, but they pulled us back in. So I guess we're going to have to talk a little bit about last night's episode, or Tuesday night's episode. But we really don't have to because, well, we actually talked about this episode on my very last vlog from last year, the season ender, just before the season ending vlog, the Why There Was No Gold. So we're going to forget about those guys skinny dipping in Frankfurt because it's not worth talking about. What we're going to talk about is I don't know what his name is, but I think it's Ken Dykstra's brother. You know, the guy that went into the historical museum or something like that, historical society, and talked to the guy that looked like he came from the Doonesbury comic strip. And they found documentation. Wow, documentation. He was like a little kid at Christmas that got the toy he wanted, just kind of almost like pissing all over himself that he found documentation. But look, moron, we told you about documentation last year. But of course, they kind of omitted a lot of the documentation that was around the capture of Jefferson Davis. So let's just sort of go over what they didn't talk about that's actually documented, and we can go from there. See, my documentation, like I said in that last video, comes from Joseph G. Vale. And I think his book was called Minty and the Saber Brigade. And this guy was you could call him a secretary for the Union Army under I don't know if it's the Cumberland Brigade or whatever. And he would document skirmishes and a real historical account of everything. So you can believe my guy, or you can believe their guy who knew a guy who said he was at the captured Jefferson Davis. So let's talk about what was true and what they didn't tell you. First, it is true that the remaining funds from the Confederacy was divided. 2/3 went to Jefferson Davis. 1/3 went to his cabinet members. One was named Breckinridge. I'm just doing this from the top of my head because I've already done a video on it. So that's true. And Jefferson Davis apparently was trying to make his way to Texas or New Mexico, and the other guys, Breckinridge and his crew with an army, went to the Gulf. That's true. So what they didn't tell you was exactly how much was divided among these two. Jefferson Davis took 2/3, Breckinridge took 1/3 of the remaining money that the Confederacy had, which was a grand total of $40,000. $40,000. So Jefferson Davis took about 26 grand, and the rest went to the other guys. So then Jefferson started making his trek west, which is true. And then, of course, Jefferson Davis was accosted and taken prisoner by the Union Army. And Just like that guy who knew a guy who had a guy that talked about what they saw at this capture, there were busted up ammo boxes. That is true. But what they didn't say or didn't tell you was that when the officers arrived at the scene, they saw all these busted up ammo boxes. And they wanted to know like what was going on here, all these broken up boxes. And they found out that they did have some gold in it. And the Union soldiers had, helped themselves to the booty. So the officers basically strip searched these soldiers and took all of the money back. And this treasure that they're looking for went back to the government, the federal government, the Union Confederate government, because the Confederacy, before the Civil War, had taken out a bunch of loans. So they were just commandeering the money to help pay back some of the money that the Confederacy had basically stolen from them. So, yes, there was money. Yes, it was found with Jefferson Davis. Yes, it was hid in ammo boxes. But the money went back to the Union. And the treasure that they're seeking, and do not seek the treasure, was a grand total of $40,000. And so what the Union soldiers commandeered when they took Jefferson Davis was about $26,000. Now we could get into a bunch of scenarios like right then about all these boxes broken, and of course everybody but Minty and Pritchard were the only two that had enough sense to go back and get it. Like none of those Union soldiers would want to go back and get any gold. Let's just bury it and everybody forget about it. So, I mean, we're not going to go off into these ridiculous tangents. We're going to stick to the facts. If you want to look at this stuff up, if my memory serves me correct, it was in the University of Michigan archive. And like I said, it's the book, or the historical record, was written by Joseph G. Vale, V-A-L-E. And I'll double check that to make sure. So if there's any correction that has to be made, I'll put it on this video. But once again, they just ignore the obvious and focus on the obscure. That's all I got for you guys. You could check out the video from last year. It maybe talks a little bit more detail. I said it was called Why There Was No Gold. And it may be a little bit more specific than this. I doubt it. This one gives you the basic premise of what happened. These guys just, they don't want to tell you the entire truth. That would kind of ruin the show. So with that, I guess we have to wait for next week's painful episode of moronic behavior. Treasure Troller signing off.